Good afternoon. My name is Ben Zong, and I'm the Online Communications Manager with the California Fuel Partnership. Thank you for joining our webinar today. This is one of 4 virtual briefings and the last one for the day, so if you missed the other 3, we will be recording these briefings and posting them onto our YouTube. Once they're posted, we will send out an email with a link to those recordings. This comes ahead of our Hydrogen Village tomorrow in Sacramento at the state capitol. The Hydrogen Village is the largest showcase of hydrogen and fuel cell technologies ever at the state capitol, and it's an opportunity for us to educate policymakers in one of the world's largest economies. The Hydrogen Village is a joint effort of the California Fuel Cell Partnership, the California Hydrogen Coalition, the California Hydrogen Business Council, the Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Energy Association, and the Stationary Fuel Cell Collaborative. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our sponsors for these briefings, GTI and its Hydrogen Technology Center. And with us today are representatives from the hydrogen and fuel cell industry who will share with us the opportunities and the challenges of hydrogen mobility and energy. During these briefings, everyone is muted. However, we will have a Q&A session at the end. And so please use the questions feature to ask questions to the panelists. And with that, we have with us today Jennifer Hamilton from the California Fuel Cell Partnership, who will be moderating today's session on hydrogen production. Jennifer?
Thanks, Ben, and welcome everybody. And welcome to our panelists. Thanks so much for taking time today. I will say, unfortunately, one of our panelists did have a travel issue, so he is not able to join us. That's Dave Edwards of Air Liquide, but we'll be sure to plug their new liquefaction plant that's coming online soon. So hopefully you in the audience have had an opportunity to listen to some of our previous panels, and this is the last one today. There might be a little bit of repetition because there was some mention of things earlier, but we really want to talk about this really big topic of hydrogen production. What I want to do first, though, is start off by allowing our panelists to give a brief introduction of themselves and a little bit about what their companies are doing, what their activities are in relation to hydrogen production. So I'm going to go off our list here, which the first one there is Michael Hoban of Chevron. So Michael.
Thanks, Jennifer. Glad to be part of the panel today, and thank you for having me. So Michael Hoban, I am General Manager within Chevron's New Energies business, focused on hydrogen and specifically focused on transportation within that hydrogen business. So for a little bit about what Chevron's doing in space, Chevron believes that the future is lower carbon. And just last year, I stood up a new business really focused on just accelerating that decarbonization journey, both within Chevron's own assets, but also to create a low carbon business to really focus on those harder to abate sectors. This business will be supported with an expected $10 billion investment through 2028 in 4 kind of key segments: carbon capture and sequestration, offsets and emerging technologies, as well as renewable fuels, and the 4th one is hydrogen. So Chevron is not new to hydrogen. Currently produce over 1 million tons a year through our traditional businesses supporting refining, but also have retail experience back to 2005 when we had some pilot stations, and also have decades of experience in R&D, over 75 active patents, which we think are applicable to really supporting our future work here. Within my business, within the Chevron New Energies business, we're looking at approximately 150,000 tons per year of production by the end of the decade. So that's our target. I can give some indication of an initial work in that space, specifically California as well. We view Richmond, our refinery in Richmond, California, as kind of an initial and scalable hub for hydrogen production. That site actually has the largest and most advanced hydrogen production plant on the U.S. West Coast currently, and matter of fact has about 30 tons per year of excess production available there. So we see that as an initial hub, which we think will be an anchor for Northern California. But it doesn't stop just there. We are looking at green pilots, a waste to hydrogen production facility, as well as solar electrolysis in that space, which will help. And also looking at exploring the potential carbon capture and sequestration opportunity, which will allow for blue production. So that, as well as other investments in the space, Chevron Ventures invested Raven production technology for waste to hydrogen, as well as Starfire, which is a startup looking at essentially ammonia production to be used as a hydrogen at some point. So again, quick overview, but glad to be here. And thanks again for having me.
Thanks, Michael. And I know we did a sound check before, but unfortunately, we're having a little trouble, or at least I am, with the audio. So we'll have you do a test before your next set of comments there. Okay, thank you. Thank you, though. Bill, want to introduce yourself and talk about
Jennifer.
these activities? Yeah.
How are you? Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Nice to be here with everyone. Good to see everyone. Bill Zobel with Iwatani. Iwatani is a fully integrated supplier of hydrogen and consumer solutions for the marketplace. For those that have watched the news, we announced a project with SGH2 in the Central Valley, Lancaster, California, where we'll be building out 11 ton a day plant to supply the market here in Southern California in conjunction with Shell. We're very excited about that, due to come online here in 2023. So hopefully we'll talk a bit more about that as we move into the panel. We're very excited to see all kinds of other supply opportunities coming to the fore. We speak with folks on the supply side all the time. Great to have a panel to talk about that today. We have a couple of partnerships that we've put together. One with Toyota, where we're building out 7 stations with them. And then we're also going to add on to that our GFO stations and the recently announced stations we're building with Michael's team over at Chevron. We're excited to be part of that 30 station build out as well. So a lot going on the supply side and on the demand side, and we're just very, very happy to be part of all that. So look forward to speaking with everybody today on the panel.
Great, thank you. Brenor, you're next on our list. You want to give an introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much. Good to be here this afternoon. Brenor Brophy. I'm Vice President of Project Development at Plug Power. So for any of you that don't know Plug Power, we have been in the hydrogen business for more than 20 years. We supply fuel cell systems for forklift trucks. It's the core of our business. And we have shipped more fuel cell systems, done more refuelings, and sold more fuel than really anybody else in the fuel cell business. We buy more merchant liquid hydrogen than anyone else in the world, approaching 40 tons per day. And then we run our own logistics system. And I apologize if you can hear my dogs in the background. We run our own logistics system to deliver that hydrogen to our customers. And we pride ourselves on really never letting a customer go dry for hydrogen. Our customers are folks like Amazon, Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart, Kroger's. We think about 25% of all of the groceries in the US are moved on a Plug Power forklift. So we're deeply embedded into that business. So given that we have that much demand for hydrogen, we realized a couple of years ago we needed to start producing our own hydrogen as well. And we've embarked on a vertical integration strategy where we have our own electrolyzer technology, our own liquefaction technology, and we have a stated plan of 500 tons of green hydrogen, liquid hydrogen production by 2025 and 1,000 tons per day by 2028. And my job is really bringing that hydrogen production capacity online. We've announced several projects so far. Our first project is in Western New York. It's 75 tons per day. That'll be the largest single site doing hydrogen liquefaction anywhere. And it's the largest PEM electrolysis plant in the world that's actually being built. It's not vaporware or just an announcement. Our second project is in Southeast Georgia. That's a 45 ton per day plant. That's currently under construction as well. And the very first phase of that is a small 2 ton per day plant that we call our Pathfinder plant. That's actually in commissioning as we speak, and we expect to be making the first gas from that plant by the end of this month. That's going to be a big milestone for us. That will be our very first green hydrogen plant. We currently also operate a 10 ton per day liquid hydrogen plant in Charleston, Tennessee. So that is we're the only non-IGC company to own and operate our own hydrogen liquefaction plant. We've announced a big PPA for a wind project in Texas. That wind project is it's the largest single phase build onshore wind project in the country. And we have more than half of that wind project to power a 45 ton per day liquid hydrogen plant there. And of course, we announced our 30 ton per day green hydrogen plant in Fresno County, California. That should be the largest green hydrogen plant on the West Coast until we build a bigger one. That project is attached to a 300 megawatt new build solar plant. We're currently just in the EIR process, so obviously a lengthy CEQA process for California projects. We have an expected COD of that in 2024. That plant generates enough green energy from the solar plant for all of the synthesis, all of the liquefaction, and all of the delivery with fuel cell trucks for the capacity of the hydrogen plant throughout California. So we really look forward to bringing that capability online. Our aim is a national network of hydrogen production. It's a high resiliency network. What that means is every customer sits in the footprint of at least 2 plants, and every plant has at least a week's worth of product on site. So what that means is if a plant goes down, the neighboring plants can step in. What Plug is doing here is planting a huge flag on the top of the hill to early adopters that says, if you choose hydrogen for your transit fleet, for your commercial vehicle fleet, for your data center backup, Plug will be there with the hydrogen, with the logistics network to deliver the hydrogen, and with the refueling network for your application. So we're definitely building ahead of the market, but we're doing that intentionally to send out that signal to early adopters.
And with a plan B, if you will. So that's great planning. And Al Burgunder from Linde, welcome. And would you like to do your intro, please? Oh, you're on mute, Al.
You know.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Al Burgunder, Director of Clean Hydrogen for Linde. Linde is the largest global industrial gas company. And we've been in the hydrogen business since about 1948. So we're pretty familiar with this, with the production, distribution, and so forth of hydrogen. This is exciting to be on this panel with especially the various companies that are involved here, and we've worked with many of them over the years. Linde is a vertically integrated organization. We design, we build, we run our own hydrogen production facilities around the world. We also supply major refineries and other hydrogen consumers around the world. We deliver our product by pipeline, liquid transport, and compressed gas. We have the largest liquefaction capacity globally. We're very proud of that. We've been doing that since about 1952. Over the past 12 years, we have installed over 200 fueling systems around the world. And right now, we are actively supporting market expansions in Asia, North America, Africa, and Europe. Jennifer, I'm looking forward to today's discussion and your questions that are coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So, as I mentioned, there's been some talk of production throughout these other panel discussions today, and you know, as is expected with hydrogen, there's a lot of crossover. We try to kind of put these different subject areas together, but there's always those relationships, right? And the last one happened to be on light duty vehicles, and there was some talk of infrastructure. But I do want to talk about that in the sense that, you know, there was a slide in our stations update webinar yesterday, and we think that we are seeing, you know, some relief in some of the supply issues we've experienced before. But, you know, as has been talked about, the Fuel Cell Partnership put out the vision document that talks about 1,000 stations for 1 million vehicles. And just in that light duty market itself, that's growing really rapidly. So I was hoping some of you could comment or elaborate. Michael, this might give you a chance to restate some of the stuff you said about, you know, working toward just that in that market alone, being sure that as our station network grows, not only in California, but even beyond, you know, that we make sure we have the supply to support that and make sure that that market is supported, because it has been here the longest in California. California has led the US on this. And as a fuel cell driver myself, as I'm sure many of you are, I really want to see this really succeed. So Michael, do you want to kick that off, and we'll do a little sound check first before you?
Yeah, is this better?
That's much better. Yeah.
Okay. Apologies for that. It looks like it auto-selected my computer mic instead. So, yeah. Anyways, So regarding support for light duty infrastructure, clearly light duty infrastructure has a strong role to play. California light duty drivers have really led the way in terms of adoption of fuel cell technology at scale. And so, really important what drivers in the state have done and what the state has done to set up the ecosystem for that to be enabled. So that said, it's been kind of a tough go. And we know that the technology in some ways and supply chains are still developing. So there's some work to be done here, and I think Chevron has a role to play. So I don't know how much of this came through in my opening, but Chevron's looking at our refinery in Richmond as kind of an initial hub for hydrogen production. That is a large advanced hydrogen production plant there with ability to scale. It's got excess capacity and future optionality for potentially exploring carbon capture and eventual blue production at that plant. So that's an example of what Chevron's doing today, evaluating production and getting hydrogen from that facility onto the market to, one, support new stations, the stations that exist today, the stations that Chevron's working with Iwatani to build, that was just announced, that I think Bill spoke to previously, putting more molecules on the market as well, increasing essentially the reliability of that network broadly. So again, more stations, more hydrogen on the market. Really important that we continue to support the light duty market here, because really leading the way in California and in the world.
Absolutely, thanks. And that's a great example of, leveraging some resources that you guys have. You mentioned excess hydrogen already, so let's get that into the market, right? So that's great. Bill, I think in the last panel you mentioned another production project that Iwatani's involved in.
I mentioned the SGH2 project in Lancaster. That's
Okay.
the one that we're building in conjunction. We're not building it. SGH2 is building it. We're taking offtake with Shell. We're excited about that. That plant's going to come online late 23, early 24. And it's going to supply primarily the SoCal market, Southern California market, with gaseous hydrogen. So we're putting together a full service distribution system for that product. And we're excited to have that enter into the market. In our agreement with Chevron, some of the supply will come from there. Chevron will supply some of the NorCal stations for us, and as partners, we'll move forward together in the deployment of the additional 30 stations that are planned between the two of us. So very, very excited about that. I did mention there are obviously other supply options that we're looking at. There are all kinds of people out there that are looking to develop supply opportunities based on the market and what's going on. I think Brenor called it best vaporware. A lot of vapor out there. A lot of talk, a lot of action. But I think as time goes on, we'll fetter out what's real and what's not. And those of us that know the business and know what to look for will focus in on the right opportunities and continue to green the supply chain with additional hydrogen.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think, there's just a real uptick, a real enthusiasm and excitement, it seems like, with production in a relatively short amount of time is how I perceive it. Al, how about you guys with Linde? I know you've been supporting.
So Linde has been in California since 1962 in terms of producing liquid hydrogen. We have a large facility in Ontario, California that has been serving the market. And in the last year and a half, or actually the last probably 9 months, we have been actively engaged in serving the market. Before then, the hydrogen fueling stations were under contracts with other suppliers. And so we unfortunately didn't have the ability to supply any product at that point in time, but now we do. And we're happy to say that we're supplying a good deal of product into the market today. And I think we've been helping in terms of the availability of fuel. Another thing that's happening is that we're expanding Ontario. It's been announced that we received a grant from the California Energy Commission to build an electrolyzer. And so we are currently working on that project right now, where we're going to expand the capacity. 2 years ago, we also put in a 500 bar fueling system for filling system for filling high pressure tube trailers that will deliver gas to various fueling stations. And that is actually commissioned last September and is actively deployed right now in terms of fueling or providing fuel for the gas hydrogen fueling stations that are in place right now. So we're actually pretty excited about how things are developing. We're excited to see all the investment that's going on the part of Iwatani and Plug Power and others. So this is great news, and I think it's really going to set the stage for a major expansion of fueling vehicles or fuel cell vehicles across the state, and prepare the state for heavy duty fueling also, which is really vital.
Absolutely. And I didn't pay him to do that, but that's a perfect segue. And Brenor, I want to get to you too. But let's talk about it in terms of the heavy duty. So again, Fuel Cell Partnership has a document, our Fuel Cell Electric Truck Vision document, has a 2035 goal of 200 stations to support 70,000 vehicles. But Brenor, we were talking in the beginning before we started, what was that metric you threw out on the numbers of trucks just in the US? 70,000 is a drop in the bucket, right?
Exactly. So when we talk about 500 tons per day of new hydrogen capacity, it sounds like a big number, but it's really only a big number because we're running up such a small baseline. The reality is 500 tons is just 10,000 trucks. So 50 kilograms a day, rough usage. So there's 4 million Class 8 trucks in the United States. That's 200,000 tons a day. And so the way Plug thinks is 500, 5,000, 50,000, and that's how we expect to increase our production of hydrogen. And you have to think in those ways if you're serious about basically replacing diesel and replacing fossil fuels. Those are the quantities of hydrogen we'll be working at late this decade, early next decade.
Yeah, and I mean, we're just talking about 1 or 2 applications, right? We haven't even broached marine,
Every
rail.
time we think, are we making too much hydrogen? We start thinking stationary fuel cells, data center backup, marine, trains, trucks, the sort of, our customers like Amazon and Walmart, 10,000 trucks is not very many trucks compared to the fleets that they operate. And so you suddenly say, oh no, we need to make a lot more. So definitely the applications, there's essentially a bottomless pit for hydrogen demand. I think all of us here, and this is great, we will all be chasing demand in the back half of this decade.
Yeah. So, Bill, what kind of policies can really help to facilitate and help? I mean, you guys are all thinking big already, but I mean, getting new players in and new production. So what sorts of policies do you think, or where do we need to see policy that can really help support that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's a lot of good being done this session in the legislature and at the Air Resources Board and the Energy Commission here in California. And I'll start with California and then jump to the federal level, and I'll try to be brief and give the others a chance to opine as well. I think in the state, what we really continue to need here is consistency. Right? There's no shortage of support. What we need is consistency in terms of these policies, where they're headed, what they're offering, and not a change in the wind from this administration to the next administration, but something that's going to be out there, much like the LCFS. It's a long-term program where folks can make investments, investors can come in and make investments, and earn a return on those investments based on their on their projections. Investors will invest where they have some certainty, and if the state continues to provide that certainty and that confidence, then investors will continue to invest, like all the folks here on this panel, and continue to grow this marketplace. Jumping up to the federal level, right? Currently, a lot of the support for this particular market is driven in the states, in the state of California in particular. The feds have now jumped on board, at least on the supply side, with the infrastructure bill. That's good. We've got the hydrogen hub proposals out there that I think is going to really help stimulate the market. Really at the next piece of this federal, I think the federal policy needs to be this Build Back Better program that has incentives for vehicles and so forth, other production incentives. And then at the agency level, a federal RIN for hydrogen would be very helpful. That would help expand the market beyond the borders of this state into other states, like has happened with other markets such as biodiesel and CNG or RNG. And when you start having that, cross-state adoption, then markets really start to grow, and they start to grow much more quickly. So from a policy perspective, it's going to be consistency, continuity, and then at the federal level, really the addition of the downstream side, the demand side of the equation, and then a RIN.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have a need on the demand side. I think that that's proving out to be pretty apparent. Going back to you, Al, just thinking about, Linde is traditionally an industrial, what we call an industrial gas company, right? And all the expansion you guys are doing and working on to support the transport sector specifically, do you see that becoming sort of a dedicated area in the IGC world? Because historically, and some of the kind of struggles that we've had is we've gotten hydrogen, but it's been sort of not, a dedicated supply towards those stations, and that's where we've kind of seen the lapses, I guess. So I don't want you to speak for all the IGCs, but I mean, do you see that as sort of maybe a theme?
Yeah, I think actually I am absolutely confident that the IGCs are very focused on growing the hydrogen business. I think it's fair to say that in the past, the light duty market has been built on an infrastructure that really wasn't prepared to respond to the light duty market, and that's unfortunate. Not sure, what the reason for that is, and we weren't directly involved in that. But in any case, I think everybody has clarity now. Everybody recognizes what's going to be required. I think it's fair to say that the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers of the trucks and cars and so forth, are also very sensitive to this. So I think they're going to be more focused on the availability of supply and the fueling stations being in place before they really bring their product to market, in a sense. And that's a good thing from the standpoint it gets everybody aligned. As a representative of the industrial gas community, I am absolutely confident that this community will be growing the supply of hydrogen, investing heavily. Fortunately, we're a very healthy industry financially, and so we're in a very strong position to respond to the needs as they unfold over time. And I see that happening already. I mean, unfortunately, Dave Edwards from Air Liquide couldn't be here with us today, but that's an example where Air Liquide has made an investment, starting, I think they announced it 2 years ago, and in terms of putting a plant into California and stating up front that it was primarily there to serve the fueling market. Okay, so that's a good indicator. I think you'll see things coming from Linde over time. Okay, and there's no doubt that there's other players out there. I mean, Iwatani is a great example. Bill talks about the arrangement he has in Lancaster, but Iwatani has a very significant hydrogen infrastructure, production infrastructure in Japan.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to say they're using Linde equipment to do that also. But it's they are a competent, well qualified, deep organization, and that's an example. This industry is bringing a lot of value, and I think that having other people like Chevron getting involved in this, Plug Power getting involved, these are very important contributions to the market. And as Brenor had indicated, we're all going to be getting a piece of the pie. It's not going to be an overly competitive market. There's going to be plenty of growth here for everybody to share in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Plenty to go around, right?
Plenty to go around.
Yeah. So there's been talk, throughout the day, and I think Bill just mentioned it with the hydrogen hubs. Of course, the collective, we are working, for California hub. There's obviously all the other locations and states coming together. And we're excited to see what that looks like. But can any of you speak to, how the hubs has affected the way you're thinking about production and distribution, even, or without giving away any secrets? I know nobody wants to talk a whole lot about details yet, but just kind of on a high level. Or also things like, meeting California's renewable requirements for the hydrogen that's distributed, and the hubs concentrating on the decarbonized hydrogen, right? Not so much concentrating on the colors of it so much, but as the carbon intensity of the hydrogen that's produced. You've mentioned electrolyzer using waste gases. So I don't know if there's other technologies that I'm not so versed in that you might mention? Brenor?
Who are you
To I think there are many pathways to low carbon hydrogen, and that it's important to think about it that way. We bandy around marketing terms like green and blue, and they're kind of shorthand because those of us in the business know what they are. But I think we're all very focused that the key thing is not putting fossil carbon into the atmosphere. And so whatever the pathway is, the metric that we're measured to is that carbon intensity score. Plug is very much focused on the low to zero CI part of that spectrum, typically electrolytic hydrogen. But I think the complication there is the energy feed into that. So how green is that electricity? And there aren't really a lot of good systems, especially on the federal level, to do that. So I will tell you, California, from our perspective, is great as a measuring stick. We will have plants in New York that will have a California LCFS CI score, even though very few kilograms of hydrogen are going to get trucked from New York to be sold in California. And so in that way, California has done a great job in just sort of establishing some standards that we can measure ourselves by, and creating a level playing field. So when we talk about hydrogen in the important sense for climate change mitigation, then we're talking about the right figures. I think there's going to be a lot of imaginative solutions. I love the H2G2 project in I mangled that, but down gasifying waste paper, that's brilliant, and I think that's a really interesting project. Gasification of trash can often be a double-edged sword because what's really going into that process. But I think we all agree waste paper is a great product that not go into the landfill, but to go to make hydrogen. So I really think there's going to be some super imaginative projects coming out. We're starting to see them already, and I kind of look forward to seeing what the industry turns up.
Any other comments about Quebec?
Well, Jennifer, your question, you were referring to some of the hubs that are under development, and this is in response to the infrastructure bill. Linde is actively working on a number of hubs across the country, and what I see beneficial about those hubs is that they're going to serve a variety of industries, a variety of users, and those users are going to have the experience of working with hydrogen and thinking about how to expand the use of that hydrogen across their manufacturing activities or their transportation activities and so forth. So I see the hubs as a seed germinating to expand into a whole variety of applications, and I see this as it's going to achieve the goal that it originally has set out, and that is to expand the broad use of hydrogen for decarbonization. So I think it has it's $8 billion. That needs to be cost shared for another $8 billion, so a total of $16 billion. That sounds like a lot of money. It probably is not whenever these things actually get up and running. But the fact of the matter is, I think it's going to still be a big stimulus for transitioning our country from a fossil-dependent environment to something that is much greener and much more environmentally friendly.
Maybe I'll just add that I think the concept of these hubs that I think everybody's really excited about is really just indicative or illustrative of the unique value proposition that hydrogen brings. Right, hydrogen as a Swiss Army knife for the energy transition requires this kind of concentrated hub philosophy and concept where we're putting together production and looking broadly in the demand space. I think it's really important. It's really exciting, and I think it is something that will spur a lot of momentum in the industry. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what comes out of it.
Yeah, good point, Michael. I think that's a good way to think about it. Okay, looking at our questions. There's some long statements here, and I think we're touching on these in terms of the colors of hydrogen. There's a question about who's going to know the difference about the carbon intensity of the hydrogen, right? Is it the legislators? Is it the consumers? Can you speak to kind of how that might be marketed or advertised, or make people aware of the carbon intensity? I mean, I think the goal, and everybody's working towards the lowest or zero or minus, negative carbon intensity for hydrogen. But I also know that the reality is that even though we have improved emissions from what people call gray hydrogen, which, I think any hydrogen is good hydrogen in my mind, but how to get that messaging out there. So kind of
Yeah,
more
Jennifer,
of a messaging marketing.
I'd love to comment on that, because I think
Absolutely.
This is an interesting point. First of all, California, as we all know, has a requirement that if you're going to be supplying, if they're going to be helping to fund stations in California, the hydrogen has to be 40% renewable, okay? And if the hydrogen wants to get any of the LCFS credits that are available, it has to be, as the carbon level has to be low. It has to be below a certain level, and there's incentives to go further than that to reduce the carbon level. So there are, I really compliment California for thinking this way. There's a certain amount of available supply. You want to incent people to supply renewable product, but you don't want to make it overly challenging. But the LCFS credit also brings in the incentive to drive that carbon content down, okay? And hopefully even down to negative values using renewable natural gas, for instance. So there are incentives in place. The infrastructure bill, that has a requirement that you have to have your carbon intensity 80% below what normally comes off of a steam methane reformation process. And so it's 2 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of hydrogen. So, these are both enacted requirements. There has to be compliance. There's going to have to be a mandate there is a mandate to actually demonstrate performance to these things. So I think people can first of all be comfortable that they are getting a low carbon renewable product. Okay, it may not be totally renewable, okay, but it's, we don't have the infrastructure in place today to provide 100% across the board. Okay, Brenor is clearly working on that in terms of driving that. We're looking in the same direction. We're putting electrolyzers in place to get green, which is zero. And other people, and probably Chevron, talking about their SMR in Northern California, is probably going to be reusing renewable natural gas, and that might even have a carbon intensity of -200 or 300. So these are all very good steps, and these are demonstrating the fact that there's a number of different ways that you can respond to the marketplace. Okay, and I think that's the thing that really is important. I kind of liken this. We have all grown up with the idea of unleaded plus gas and premium gas, okay, and you pay a different price. The other thing that has to be considered is all this hydrogen is not going to be at one price. Depending on what you want, there is going to be over time, there is going to be some variation in pricing. If you want really low carbon, you might be paying a little bit higher price in time. If you want just, what's required, the minimum is required, you'll be paying a different price. I think that's going to be a reality of our future because there are cost factors that go into each of these production methodologies, sure. And that has to be acknowledged that it's no different than what you're seeing in the current fuel markets. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Michael, any other comments towards that?
Yeah, just a quick add. Just in terms of the importance of being, kind of technology neutral as we look at solutions here. I think there's enough interconnectedness in the hydrogen space right now that we need to be supporting all aspects of hydrogen production, and then looking for ways to decouple both the advancement of the uses, so vehicles, with the production. Because if we try to do these things perfectly in step as we move forward, we're going to have a crash. And so let's avoid that. Let's look at technology neutral solutions that are going to really enable this market to develop quickly.
Okay. There's a question on here related to is there interest from power customers for renewable hydrogen in California, and are they talking about using hydrogen thermal RECs or RECs to account for the environmental benefits? Have you had a lot of interaction? Yeah, I know, in the groups, in the circles that I'm in, there's a ton of interest from the utilities for hydrogen, of course, blending and things like that. And I'm not very familiar, admittedly, on the REC system, but any comment to that?
Brenor would be perfect, but I think we lost him for the moment. I just think it's just exactly what he does.
Well, maybe we'll come back to that.
Okay.
So how about there is a program in Europe, I believe, that's sort of a certification of your sourced hydrogen, if you will. I'm not too familiar with it, and I think I've heard rumblings of sort of a certification program for your CI of hydrogen here. Any thoughts on how that, if that's a good idea, could that be implemented and so forth?
Well, California has that actually. I mean, they have established pathways that if you want to produce and supply into the LCFS market and actually to their, the fueling stations that they funded, you have to have demonstration proof that of the pedigree of the product. Okay, so I think that's established. I think when California has been a leader in this space, and I think that over time we'll see more in terms of, let's say, the EPA or others getting involved in this in terms of establishing a pathway that's national. So there are the baselines. Plus, there's our national labs, especially Argonne National Lab, has done some very competent work on establishing the carbon intensity of various products, looking at what they refer to as wells to wheels. Okay, from the very beginning of the feedstock to the hydrogen going into the car. So and so they've developed some modeling to help evaluate the carbon intensity. So we've made good progress over the years in terms of establishing as I said, the pedigree of the product.
I think the only thing I would add to that is if policymakers are going to work from the framework we have here, it needs to be consistent, right? We certainly don't want a patchwork of different programs from state to state, but having something that's more ubiquitous, that's transferable, would certainly be preferred, I think, by all suppliers. There he is.
Brenor.
We can come back to that question now.
Yeah, Brenor, there was a question here on let me go back to it. Sorry, hang on. So I get it correct. I don't want to try to paraphrase and get it totally wrong. It was about utilities and using RECs and renewable hydrogen, and now I'm scrolling and okay. So is there interest from power customers for renewable hydrogen in California? And are customers talking about using hydrogen thermal RECs to account for the environmental benefits? I thought you might be a good one to speak to that.
Me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. I have contractors in my house, and they literally tripped the circuit breaker on my internet.
Oh no.
So I reestablished contact. So sorry, the question was green RECs for.
Are customers talking about using hydrogen thermal RECs to account for environmental benefits and renewable hydrogen in California? Is there a need for that or a request for that?
I'm not sure how you handle hydrogen thermal RECs, to be honest. The lowest value of hydrogen is burning it. Frankly, it's far too expensive to just burn, at least today. And so I think those applications that rely on the thermal aspects of it are going to be down the road a little bit, because it's just not enough value from the gas. That'd be my first thought, but I think the others may have different opinion.
Well, let me comment, not so much in California, because I can't speak to California, but across the country, there are a number of projects that are moving in that direction, actually, producing hydrogen for the purpose of putting it into a combined cycle turbine to produce electric energy. And you know, to Brenner's point, it's not the most economically efficient solution. The BTU value of hydrogen is lower than methane, and so it's a bit of a challenge. There may be circumstances where it makes sense. A lot of companies are actually pursuing demonstrations of this, partly to make sure that the equipment is functional and works with the hydrogen with no problem. There are some funded projects from the Department of Energy in this light, especially taking, let's say, nuclear energy that's not being used efficiently and making hydrogen, and then making that available for whether it's transportation or putting it into hydrogen or into production of electricity by burning it. So there are some things, but I think Brenor hit the nail on the head that may not be the most efficient use of hydrogen, and so we'll see how that unfolds over time.
Yeah, the way we're seeing a lot of these same projects, a lot of people are piloting, but the economics aren't there to actually go do something. The way we think about it is burning hydrogen in a turbine is not a bad way to make electricity back out of hydrogen. You know, the most efficient combined cycle gas turbines are about the same efficiency as fuel cells. So it is a good way to turn hydrogen into electricity, and it also can handle less pure hydrogen than a fuel cell system needs. So that part of it is absolutely valid. So we see it as it's a way to shift energy in time or space. And so if you have renewable energy that is stranded in one of those two dimensions where it's the energy is in one place, but it's too expensive to move it by wires to another place, you can move it perhaps in the form of hydrogen and then turn it back into electricity. Or you shift it in time, and this is, you know, the classic sort of storage story for hydrogen, long-term storage. Those applications make sense. I don't think they're the first applications, and frankly, you know, hydrogen's role in helping the electric grid is just one of the things it does. I think its role as decarbonizing hard to decarbonize sectors like transportation, heavy industry is far more interesting than helping out the grid. That's sort of just ancillary services. It'll be a nice place to go, but let's get rid of diesel first.
Yeah. So thanks for that. I want to kind of bring it back to a little bit more high level in thinking about production and hydrogen as a whole. Where do you all see a tipping point, and whatever that means to you? Thinking about the different transit applications, on-road, off-road, pipeline, distribution, all the, you know, production, all those things, or whatever that might mean. So, Michael, do you have a comment on that? What, you know, Chevron's getting back into this, and it's great, and I'm so glad to see it. But, you know,
yeah,
that tipping point might be.
No, good question. I think in some ways, hydrogen's had several false starts. You know, this concept of it's a fuel of the future, but it's always going to be, has been a running joke for a long time. And you know, in some ways, I think you could argue that we potentially passed the tipping point for at least the momentum that's behind what's going on with hydrogen today. So I don't know if I could tell you what I think a future tipping point would be, a specific stat that would suddenly put us over the mark there, but the momentum around hydrogen today is so strong and so palpable. I think the group of people on this panel and other panels today is, I think, indicative of the very serious work that's going on in the space. So I think we're well on our way, if not there.
Great.
Yeah, I would think there are many billions of dollars sitting on this panel backing hydrogen right now. That is probably not something we could say in past waves.
Yeah, true. I mean, that's a great thing to think about.
Yeah, I would. One thing I would comment on is I think 50 heavy-duty fueling stations in California and 200 across the West will be a major shift in terms of hydrogen for transportation across the country. I think that'll establish such a critical mass, and it's a critical mass that not only in terms of fuel production, the dispensing of the fuel, but the manufacturing of the trucks and so forth to fill the marketplace. And I think that that will, if we can achieve that goal across the West Coast, then that will just migrate quickly. Now, the Hydrogen Hub program will facilitate the transition of that to the East Coast and across the country, but I think that that would be a big achievement.
Yeah, I think for us, we should. Sorry, Bill. Go ahead.
No, please. Sorry.
I was going to say for us, I think the tipping point is going to be the large commercial trucks. So, our customers already operate large logistics fleets. In theory, a Walmart truck could go coast to coast refueling at Walmart facilities where we already have refueling infrastructure. And those large commercial operators are typically the first adopters of new technology. Is a sort of hand-me-down chain of where trucks go to. And they start with the Amazons and they end up with the sole owner doing drayage out of a port. So I think as we see those large fleet operators start to turn on to hydrogen, that's a demand signal that is super strong. As I said, 10,000 trucks is not a lot of trucks. It is a lot of hydrogen. And so I think, that's really what we're looking to. The beauty of it is even today, the very first generation of plants that we're building for green, completely green hydrogen, they're cost competitive with diesel, and where diesel prices are going, they're more cost competitive every single day. And so coming in at cost parity per mile to the incumbent fuel is super important. And the fact that we can do that today with green hydrogen in the diesel market, I think gives just a huge amount of growth. So we'll look to the adoption, the first large fleet adoptions of fuel cell trucks.
That would have been my comment. Yeah, is that when the total cost of ownership of these tractors turns out to match that or be better than that of the incumbent fuel, you'll have these things flying off the shelf. They'll be in every showroom across the country, and you won't have any problem building out infrastructure. The cost of the fuel will come down incredibly quickly, and people will start adopting across all classes of vehicles, light, medium, heavy duty, and outside of the on-road mobility sector into off-road as well. So excited to see that starting to happen already.
In our last few minutes, there's a question here asking about, again, kind of coming back to the distribution, the outlook for long distance pipeline delivery. We do have, about 1,600 miles of hydrogen pipeline in the country right now. Al, does that sound right? I think that's the number that the Department of Energy put out.
Yeah, that strikes me as a little bit high, but I don't know that for sure. But but I will comment that yes, it would be great to have hydrogen distribution so you could make the stuff in Kansas and send it out to California by pipeline. But we have to keep in mind there's that requires a very large investment. People build these pipelines because they have confidence that they're going to be able to pay for the pipelines over time. And so I think for the next 10 years, you're going to see more local production of hydrogen. But once you get to a critical mass, and I'm not sure where that would, what constitutes a critical mass, but once you get to the critical mass, pipelines will be looked upon as the next stage. I mean, there is value in terms of producing hydrogen in a central location at scale. And scale will help to reduce the cost of hydrogen over time. Pipeline is a nice way of moving the product out so that it can be used at the use points. But I think it's going to be a while, given the expense and the uncertainty of the market at this point.
Won't it be a great day when we see hydrogen fuel cell trucks carrying and delivering hydrogen around the country?
I will say that everyone in the pipeline space is talking about hydrogen, though. Everyone sees it coming. So if you run a pipeline, if you're in midstream, you're thinking about hydrogen, and you're talking to folks who make hydrogen.
Yeah, certainly a lot of work in materials compatibility and safety and codes and standards and things like that around pipeline for sure. Okay, let me scroll through here and see if there's anything that, there's some pretty in-depth questions, but I just want to kind of keep us on the track in the last few minutes here. There's a question about aviation fuel. I mean, I think that's definitely one of the applications that we're seeing quickly growing that's going to really put demand or add to that demand for hydrogen. Probably liquid, I would guess, but you know, another one that's going to be a big consumer potentially of hydrogen, right? Along with marine, rail. So I don't know if there's any further comments on that.
We're certainly working with Universal Hydrogen. They're working on a kind of a cartridge system for liquid hydrogen into short-haul commuter aircraft. We see Zero Avia out there. I think there's a great future for hydrogen in the short-haul and medium-haul aviation. You see what Airbus is doing, and long-haul, I think, will eventually be synthetic jet fuel. If anything, it's kind of, to my mind at least, it's the leading application because it can probably withstand the highest price for a fully green product. But that'll be the last section we get to.
Yeah. In the meantime, though, there's an awful lot of interest and growth in the area of sustainable aviation fuels, and these are liquid fuels using bio feedstocks and hydrogen. And we're actively involved in that, and there's a number of investments going on around the country. So, you know, that's utilizing a renewable product in a conventional technology that we have today in terms of jet engines. And I think that's a great space that developing, and we see a lot of potential in that area. So we're looking forward to that.
I think we shouldn't lose sight, though, that it's the trucks on the roads, it's the cars on the roads. That's where the emissions are. People get caught up with airplanes. It's only about 2% of our total emissions. It really is the boring stuff that we got to go hit hard first, and we'll get much faster returns with respect to reduction in carbon emissions, tackling those sectors. And frankly, also in the social justice and the human impact of diesel is far greater than the impact of Jet A. So that's really where the focus should be. Aviation is great, it's sexy, but we got to clean up trucks and cars.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree.
And trains.
And trains. We don't have a lot of in California. We don't have nearly enough.
But I know there's some rail projects. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
No, just quickly. I mean, whether it's aviation, whether it's heavy duty transport, these are all going to be really difficult nuts to crack on a big scale. So partnerships across industry, Chevron can't do it by themselves. I don't think anybody on this panel could do it by themselves. So we're looking at, you know, how do you partner across the value chain with the technology, with the production, with the distribution to make this work? And I think that's going to be required, whether it's heavy duty vehicles today or aviation in 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
That brings us about to time. Thank you so much, everyone, for your insight and expertise and your willingness to share and be on the panel today and be on the last panel today. One of us had to be last, right? So I thank you again, and thanks to everyone who organized this and was behind putting all this together. And I look forward to seeing, I think, all of you tomorrow, hopefully, at our Hydrogen Village event. So with that, I will let Ben take back over, and everyone have a great rest of your day.